Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to our second channel geography video. This is everyone's favorite series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about one of the big coincidences of continents and Europe really, I guess, because have you ever noticed, if you've ever looked at a map of most European-wide organizations that are exclusively for European members, if you've ever looked at one, you've probably noticed that Turkey is eligible to join or in pretty much all of them. The Council of Europe, for example, the Customs Union, they are directly in, even though, countries like, Norway or, Ukraine or Switzerland are not in this. Turkey is in there regardless. They're even a member of the EU expansion reach program, where for the longest time they looked like they were going to become EU members, a European body. How exactly does that happen? And the simple answer to this question that again I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with is the fact that most of Turkey is in the Middle East. It is an Asian country for the most part, but 3% of Turkey's area is actually found in Europe. It's this area right here. It's referred to as Eastern Thrace or European Turkey. It's east. By the way, it's ironic that the westernmost part of the country is called Eastern Thrace, but the reason for that is because Thrace is the historical region off over here, kind of like how Macedonia's. Let's not talk about that. But the moment you say Macedonia, you're gonna get 500 comments. But no, today we're here to talk about Eastern Thrace and European Turkey because again, it's not a part of the world you hear too much about. But the coincidence of this happening to stay in Turkish hands allows all of these previous things I just showed you to become possible. So how exactly does this retain in Turkey's hands, given the situation that the Ottoman Empire, the precursor to the Turkish state, was crumbling at a rapid pace. The fact that the Ottomans lasted as long as they did, they previously owned most of Balkan Europe as well as a lot of the Middle East. Then they started to crumble, and they just happened to manage to hold on to this exact thing. The most valuable part of their territory, by the way, because Istanbul is not only the most populous city in Europe, but it's also one of the most prized targets for pretty much any country in the region. But even Russia wanted to say in it because to this day Turkey blocks all of especially the Sevastopol fleet. Any of the Russia's access to the oceans is blocked by Turkey if they want to. So yeah, basically Russia really wants it. The whole world wants it. How did Turkey keep a hold of it? Well, that's a story I figured I'd tell today because I thought it was, again, quite fascinating. So basically, first of all, let's mention exactly how the Ottoman Empire starts to crumble, because before an empire properly drops, again, the Ottomans really started to go in the 1920s, but the reason that they were crumbling before that is because, again, before any empire fully goes, they start to slowly drip away, which means before the First Balkan War in the 1912, this is what the map of Europe looked like. As you can see, the Ottoman Empire, I don't know why this map's German, by the way, let's just ignore that, but as you can see, the Ottoman Empire is still the majority of countries like Albania today, even a lot of Bulgaria belongs to it, a lot of Greece in particular. All of these countries are kind of part of the Ottoman Empire still, and they're still owned by the Ottomans in some way. However, all of the Balkan countries get together and they're like, wouldn't it be cool if we made a Balkan League where Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece are like, yeah, let's do this together. Let's get on board and let's fight the Ottomans together. So they all decide, where their territories will end, and they agree to all massively expand. And as you can see, all of those countries today are much larger than they were in this first map. So they're all kind of squished and tiny together, whereas nowadays they're all moderately sized European countries. Look at that, Romania is a real sized country. Same with Bulgaria to some extent, same with Greece. They're all much larger than they previously were because they all agreed to share the spoils of all fighting the Ottomans. Because the Ottomans were crumbling anyway, they can't really fight a four-pronged force of invaders. So again, the entirety of European, Turkey or European Ottoman Empire was looking to fall to the Ottomans. And in fact, everything up to Istanbul was fought over and done by the end of the First Balkan War. However, what happened here, the reason that, again, the coincidence side comes into play, is that the two of the allies, Greece and Serbia, both decided to take a little bit more of particularly Macedonian lands than again, we're not mentioning that too much here, but they decided to take a little bit too much of Macedonian's land than they'd previously agreed. Or again, on the other side of things, it's well, Bulgaria decided to attack their allies. So essentially what happened is the war does, previously, there's only 5 players in both these wars. It was previously, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania against the Turkish, and then suddenly it turns around, it's wait. So you want to attack us? Well, we'll attack you back. And the Greeks are like, well, we could also do the same. And then Romania's like, actually, you kind of screwed us too. And then, of course, while 3 countries are fighting Bulgaria, the Ottomans get in and they manage to take all of the area, not only back to their pre-Bulgarian border, but even before that. So essentially, Bulgaria fights and they die for all of this land right here, but then they lose it again to the Turkish. And again, that might seem okay, so you're just explaining the military history thing. But then there's the coincidence of oh yeah, during World War One, they get again, the way the alliances develop and the fact that Russia has their communist resolution kind of leads to the situation where, again, Russia and Turkey goes on friendly terms with each other, and the Russian ambitions of taking Istanbul are kind of quelled. So the exact alliance of Bulgaria attacking its former I guess allies, friends, whatever you call them, and then at the same time Russia becoming friendly with Turkey leads to the situation where they can not only get their lands back, get past Istanbul, and not only get to the previous borders, go well beyond that. And the interesting thing about that, and the reason that is such a surprising fact is because all of these lands previously didn't have Turkish majority populations. So again, the way countries seem to work today, the way the international community seems to see countries is like, oh yeah, ethnic groups, that's the way to do things. That's why a lot of Germans from all across Europe, they were just sent away, like, go back to Germany at the end of World War II, because it's like, okay, let's try and make roughly ethnic national states. Ethno-national states, is that a thing? Roughly speaking, like, you try to draw the borders along where the lines are. However, because, the Ottomans came, again, they turned into Turkey, like, kind of halfway through. It's confusing stuff, because Ataturk had the huge thing, but because, let's just say Turkey came into Europe and took all these lands, they didn't have a majority in most of the places. In fact, besides Istanbul, which, for the record, even though this area is 3% of Turkey, it has 14% of the Turkish population, just because of Istanbul. But if we, live at Istanbul to the side, none of these areas had a Turkish majority, and very few of them even had a Turkish plurality. And this is where things get a little bit rough, because again, by the pure coincidence of just like, world's done with wars right now, for the most part, they decide to have a population exchange with the Greeks. They do that, and it mostly leads to the situation, some of this is because of the Balkan Wars, some is because of population exchange, where to this day, there's the very odd situation where all of the islands in the Aegean Sea, so this is Turkey, let's just call it the Greek Sea, pretty much all of them, even going right up to Turkey, belong to the Greeks. Part of that's because of the war, part of that's because of population exchange. So they agree to like, oh yeah, we'll just send all our, Greek people to your country, you send all your Turks over to us, and then we'll have roughly the same number of people, but everyone can be happy. And the way they did that is like kind of horrifying to think about, because they took, we're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from each country. They're just like, we'll just tally up the possessions that they leave here, and then you can like distribute that how you want. And yeah, it was a real mess of like forcing people over the borders. It's generally, it's been done a few times in history. You generally don't want to do that, as it turns out. But then the thing that's even worse than that, than just sending all the Greek population in European Turkey back into Turkey, back into Greece, is the thing that's even worse than that is they decided to just be like, well, we've got Bulgarians here and we're just finished a war with them, so we'll kill a majority of them. In fact, it's widely considered an ethnic cleansing. They just cleansed a bunch of the Bulgarians. So suddenly, the population areas, which was looking more like, 35% Turkish, like 35%, it's the percentage is tricky, but Turkish people were barely a plurality in the area, and they went from that into being, now it's just a majority Turkish place. So yeah, now to this day, this area belongs to Turkey. It's Turkish and Turkish people are there, but to get to that situation, they one, required, like, again, extreme coincidences, the Allies. They two, had to have their exact revolution at the time. They had to rely on Russia having that thing and deciding not to take Istanbul, because let's be honest, if Russia wanted to take Istanbul, they probably could have when Turkey's having internal fighting and stuff. But instead of doing that, they managed to establish friendly relations with Russia, and that exact series of alliances, which goes from, being friends of Russia to being friends of Europe to, like, basically being able to play the middle game again while being a member of NATO, while still being hostile towards Europe, while managing to play all those alliances. They've held on to European Turkey this entire time, and now this is just kind of like, in the same way you think of, like, some countries as having integral territory, that's kind of just how this is with Istanbul. So, yeah, if it weren't for just a little bit of infighting, this territory, this European Turkey, the thing which gives them the anchor for both European relations, for EU relations, for all of these different bodies, including one of their key factors of trade, the customs union thing. All of these things come from the fact that they happen to get this bit of land, and I find that to be quite fascinating. Because yeah, again, this is the region right here. In case you're curious, again, the borders between Europe and Turkey, they're actually pretty darn crazy. So here's what, so there's a sea border here with OpenStreetMap. In case you're curious, a lot of people tell me to use this because it updates based on rivers, based on actual borders rather than like how the borders are written down. But basically you can see how, like, even though Greece and Turkey, you'd figure like, oh, like with most countries, you split the sea halfway. Like, look over here, you see how like they split the sea halfway. No, when it comes to Greece and Turkey, all of the Turkish islands, with very few exceptions, belong to Greece. In fact, a lot of the famous places you've probably heard of if you know Greece, Greece islands, they're all in fact on this like other half of the thing, like Corfu, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not Corfu. It's I don't know the name of the Greek islands. I'm terrible with Greek island names. But all of these, like, you're like, oh, which country does this belong to? And oh, as it turns out, it's part of like Greece. Oh, and it's like, oh, like that close to Turkey? Yep, this is still Greece. And that's true for pretty much any one of these islands, and that's because of this exact same thing. So yeah, that's where the sea border looks like roughly, and as you can see, it roughly follows the thing. And even, by the way, the river borders, like, Greece got a better hand of that side, like, because there's a rough river which defines the border between Turkey and Greece here, but then every now and then, like, the Greece farmers just own some land on their side. So as you can see, this belongs to the Greeks, and the reason for that is because there's a secondary river. But still, the fact that, like, every single time there's like a maybe this should go either way, it always seems to end up in Greece's side. And because there's a whole bunch of disputes about who owns the water, and like basically this is the reason Greece and Turkey are still each other's throat. It's confusing when they're called Greeks from Greece. But anyway, That's the reason behind that. And then the rest of European Turkey, which borders to the, by the way, to the day, there's of course it borders Greece, and it also borders Bulgaria, is mostly just like, oh yeah, there's this really, really rough line, and with Bulgaria, they're extra short to make sure this thing goes out to sea. And yeah, basically, my point of this video is it's a really weird coincidence, but what makes this even weirder to me, because I looked into it and I was like, is European Turkey different? Is there a difference between the European Turks and, you know, Turks from the rest of the country? And the answer to that question seems to be yes. It's really odd here, because some of this is like, I figured would be, oh, Istanbul's a big city, that's like the majority of the population in the region. But if you look at the way they voted, so again, I always love to see this in any country, you can see a lot of the hidden divides in any country from the way they vote for, again, let's say a president, but parliament, just how they vote for their politicians. So here is what the map of Turkey looks like. As you can see, European Turkey, excluding Istanbul. Istanbul is for Erdogan, the current president that does some questionable things, but the rest of European Turkey is actually, again, distinctly voting the other way. The only places that are the same are like Ankara and then like a few other, you know, basically the south and west parts of it. So it's really odd that that's the case. But then I decided to like look up what countries vote the same way as European Turkey, and that's where things get really weird, because it kind of flips again. So here is a map of how, because in the Turkish elections, for some reason, you can vote no matter what country you live in. So again, there's like a real campaigning period where they go overseas to vote. It's a weird Turkish system. Turkey's an interesting country, but basically, as you can see, the only countries which also voted for the opposition, this is the opposition vote, by the way, right here, again, Team Red, let's say, you know, the UK, US, Russia, China, but then all the European countries you'd figure are most European and most, you know, the example of like whatever you want to consider European, like, you know, Germany or Sweden or like France, they're all very heavily Erdogan areas. I can't say his name right. Erdogan? Turkish man that you all know the name of what I'm saying. They're all very heavily for him, which, again, that's the exact opposite of how you figure it. And I can't really take, so here you can see the Erdogan equivalent, like darker yellow or like darker thing it is, then that's how my Erdogan is. And it's just kind of a fascinating little contrast to me that like, this is the only map in the world where you can get an alliance of like China, Russia, Mongolia, is that Mongolia? No, sorry, Kazakhstan, China, Russia, Kazakhstan, the US, Canada, the UK, and Spain against like Germany, France, and Sweden. It's just one of those odd little things. And then like also Australia is apparently for Erdogan, which I don't understand it all. I'm not entirely sure. You know, some of that has to be like where they you know, emigrated from, but it's just one of those odd things. European Turkey is the exception, but it's even more of an exception to like the rest of Europe's Turks, because they're like from the rest of Turkey. Anyway, with that said, European Turkey, one of the big coincidences of history. Hope you'll enjoy this video. I figured I'd just talk about something which I was always like, I feel like the European part of countries, like by pure coincidence of any country which is partially in Europe, like Georgia has a tiny bit in Europe, Armenia is arguably in Europe in some ways, by all these countries happening to have a little bit of land in current day Europe, they're in a very, you know, positive place because that allows them to join these organizations. And I just figured it was kind of interesting that like Turkey's one is not just a happy coincidence of like, oh, that's 3% of their area. It's 3% of their area which they only got because of a series of wars which all happened to go the right way after a long period of decline. Anyway, with that said, hope you'll enjoy the video. Go look up Turkey sometime. It's a fascinating country that, like, even though they have a rough reputation to the rest of the world, I don't think it's some of that is like not propaganda, but like the equivalent, and some of it is like, you know, like interesting and worth knowing about. But yeah, with that said, hope you all enjoyed this video. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye. Oh wait, no, wait. I have a subreddit now, and I'd recommend you check it out. I'm gonna post the border videos on there if you want to like post like, you know, the normal comment stuff. So thank you very much for watching. Second channel, don't care.